The kettle had just started to whistle when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind of peaceful silence I had come to treasure since retirement. I reached for the receiver, expecting a neighbor or one of those automated calls. "Hello?" I said. A calm male voice replied, "Good afternoon. Is this Mrs. Whitmore? I'm calling from Heritage Classic Motors." I froze. That name hit me like a cold wind. Heritage Classic Motors. My husband Frank had spent years working with them to restore his pride and joy, a 1969 Mustang, cherry red with a black leather interior. He called it our fourth child. It was his project, his passion, and after he passed, it became a piece of him that I couldn't part with. "Yes," I said slowly, my throat dry. "This is she." The man cleared his throat, sounding polite but uneasy. "I just wanted to confirm the sale before we release the vehicle permanently. It's under your name, but your son signed the paperwork. We wanted to verify that the transaction was approved by you." For a second, I didn't understand. His words didn't fit together. Sale? Release? Paperwork? Then it hit. My heart dropped. My hand trembled so hard the teacup slipped from my grip and shattered against the floor. The sound echoed through the empty kitchen. I stared at the pieces, tiny shards of something I couldn't put back together. "My son?" I whispered. "Andrew?" "Yes, ma'am," the dealer said. "He mentioned you couldn't make it in person but had given verbal approval. I just wanted to make sure everything was in order." The garage. I thought of the garage. Empty since last week. I'd asked Andrew about it. He'd said, "Oh, I took it to get some work done. The old engine needed attention." I hadn't questioned him. Why would I? He was my son. I swallowed hard. "What did you say his reason was for the sale?" The man hesitated. The sound of shuffling papers came through the line. "He said you needed the money, ma'am, that it was to fund a family trip to Paris." My breath caught. Paris. I'd seen photos on social media, Andrew and his wife, Sophie, posing in front of the Eiffel Tower 2 days ago. I had smiled then, proud that they could travel. I had no idea what paid for that view behind them. The silence on my end stretched. The man's tone softened. "I'm sorry if there's been a misunderstanding. We assumed it was all authorized. He presented identification and..." I cut him off. "No," I said, the word sharp. "I didn't sign anything. I didn't approve anything. That car wasn't his to sell." He went quiet. Then, carefully, he said, "Mrs. Whitmore, the sale has not been fully processed. The funds were transferred, but the title still needs your confirmation signature." I stopped it because something didn't feel right. I pressed my hand to my chest. My husband's Mustang was still there for now. The dealer's next. Words were heavy. "If you'd like, you can come in tomorrow morning. We'll hold everything until you arrive." I thanked him through a voice that didn't sound like mine. After hanging up, I sat down at the kitchen table. The air felt too still. The house, once warm, seemed hollow. The Mustang had sat in that garage for years, polished every Sunday, even after Frank passed. It wasn't about the car. It was what it represented. The years of saving. The laughter when the engine finally turned after the rebuild. The way Frank would glance at me and say, "One day, this will be Andrew's, when he's ready." But Andrew hadn't been ready. Not for the car, not for the responsibility. I stood, walked to the back door, and stared at the garage. The heavy door was closed. My reflection stared back from the dusty window. I could still see him there, bent over the hood, singing under his breath, engine grease on his hands. Now, there was nothing but an echo. The phone call played in my mind over and over. The Paris trip, the forged permission, the lie about repairs. My heart ached, but my mind began to focus. This wasn't confusion or desperation. It was deceit, a deliberate choice. I wiped my tears and picked up my notepad, the same one I used to balance bills and write recipes. This time I wrote a new list. Dealership, confirm paperwork. Call lawyer. Locate transfer details. Ask for proof of authorization. My hands were steady now. The pain had turned into resolve. Andrew thought I would never find out. He thought I would smile at their travel photos, maybe even comment something sweet and move on. He underestimated the woman his father loved, and the woman who managed every detail of this household for 40 years. When you build a family, you build trust. But when someone breaks it, you don't shout. You watch. You gather. You prepare. The clock ticked quietly on the wall. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows, carrying the smell of rain. I whispered to myself, he took something his father loved. Now he'll learn what love and responsibility really mean. I turned off the lights and headed to bed, though I knew I wouldn't sleep. The next morning, I would go to Heritage Classic Motors, and I would make sure this so-called sale never became permanent. But what the dealer said next made me realize this wasn't a mistake. It was planned. Would you confront your child immediately or wait to gather the truth? The moment I opened the garage door, the truth hit harder than I expected. The air still smelled faintly of oil and polish, but the space looked wrong. Too quiet. Too clean. The Mustang spot sat empty, a pale outline left on the floor where the tires had rested for years. I stepped closer, running my hand through the thin layer of dust, tracing the shape where Frank's pride once stood. Frank had poured himself into that car after retirement. Every weekend, I'd watch him out here, sleeves rolled up, music playing softly from an old radio. The smell of engine grease clung to his clothes. He'd look up with that tired, satisfied grin and say, "Almost done, Evie." When he died, that car became the last piece of him that moved. I kept it washed, covered, and insured. I'd even start it once a month, listening to the low rumble that reminded me he was still part of my life somehow. Now it was gone. I called Andrew. No answer. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "Where's your father's car?" Minutes passed, then an hour. I stared at the phone, hoping it would light up. It didn't. I made tea I didn't drink. I sat on the small stool in the garage, staring at the open space, remembering the day Frank took Andrew for a drive after college graduation. He told him, "One day, this will be yours. When you've earned it." Now, years later, my son had taken it without asking. The clock ticked. The garage light flickered. My stomach tightened. It wasn't only about the car. It was about respect, about the bond between a mother and a son, about promises that were supposed to mean something. Finally, near midnight, my phone rang. Andrew's name flashed on the screen. I answered before the second ring. "Where is it?" He hesitated. "Mom, don't be mad." Those 4 words made my heart sink. Because I already knew. He wasn't sorry. He was scared of the reaction, not the action. My voice stayed steady. "What did you do, Andrew?" He sighed. "It's not what you think. I sold it." The room went silent. The sound of the refrigerator in the next room seemed deafening. "You sold your father's car?" I asked. "It's not like that, Mom," he said quickly. "Laura and I needed money for the trip. I was going to buy it back later. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. That sentence burned through me. The Mustang wasn't something you just bought and sold. It was a symbol of 30 years of work, patience, and love. It carried history, not a price tag. "Andrew," I said quietly, "your father spent half his life keeping that car running. He wanted you to have it one day, but not like this." He tried to defend himself, talking over me, words blending together. "You don't understand, Mom? Laura's been stressed. We needed to do something nice. You've got the house, the pension, everything. We'll make it right." Everything. That word felt like another theft. "I don't care about money," I said. "You took something that wasn't yours to give." He went silent. The line buzzed softly. Finally, he said, "It's done. Don't make this bigger than it is." Then the call ended. I sat there for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear, the garage light humming overhead. I thought about Frank, about how proud he'd been of Andrew's first job, his wedding, his children, about how he'd always said, "He's a good kid. He'll do the right thing." That faith now felt misplaced. I walked to the wall where Frank had hung his old tools. Wrenches, screwdrivers, small jars labeled in his handwriting. I touched one, reading the fading ink. Patience. That was Frank's way. Never anger first, always patience. So I breathed, slowly, deeply. Then I made a decision. This wasn't going to end with shouting or threats. I would find out everything, why he sold it, who bought it, and what that dealership owner meant by release the car permanently. Because something about the tone of that man's voice told me the story wasn't finished. She thought she'd lost only a car, but what the dealer revealed next would change everything she believed about her son. Would you forgive your child or let them face the full consequence of their actions? The phone buzzed in my hand long after I'd stopped hoping he would call. When I finally heard his voice, it sounded calm, too calm. "Mom, I didn't sell it," Andrew said. "I only borrowed it to test with a potential buyer. I'll bring it back soon." I could hear something off in his tone. It wasn't guilt, it was control. His words came too fast, too neat, like lines he had practiced in front of a mirror. I asked quietly, "A buyer? You mean you already found one?" He paused, then changed the subject. "You should be happy, Mom. We're sorting things out." My mind flashed to the pictures his wife had posted on social media that morning, her hand holding a champagne glass. The caption said, "Paris, finally." Behind her, Andrew smiled like a man who had just won a prize. I took a slow breath. "How did you pay for that trip?" "It's complicated," he said. The line went quiet. I could almost hear his heartbeat, or maybe it was mine. "I trusted you with that car," I said. "It was your father's." He exhaled sharply. "Mom, please don't make this a big deal. It's only a car." Only a car. I ended the call before my voice betrayed me. The silence in the house felt heavy. The kettle on the stove hissed softly, a sound that used to comfort me. Now it only reminded me of everything boiling beneath the surface. Hours later, my phone buzzed again. It was an email from the dealership. Attached were scanned documents, my name, his signature, a bank transfer to Andrew's account. No mistake, no misunderstanding. I read the email 3 times. Each time it felt heavier. He hadn't sold the car because he needed money. He sold it because he wanted to prove something, to impress someone. That car carried his father's spirit, years of work, and a promise I thought my son respected. Now it was gone, traded for a photo in front of the Eiffel Tower. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark. The garage door creaked in the wind. Somewhere deep inside, love and disappointment fought for space. He didn't sell it out of need, he sold it out of pride. Would you expose him immediately? Or plan a way to make him understand the weight of what he'd done? The next morning I drove to Heritage Classic Motors. The building hadn't changed much since the day my husband first walked in there with his wide grin and grease-stained hands. That memory stayed with me as I parked in the visitor lot and took a deep breath before stepping inside. A man in his 50s approached, polite but cautious. "Mrs. Whitmore?" he asked. "I'm Daniel, the owner. Please come in." His office smelled faintly of leather and polish. Framed photographs of vintage cars lined the walls, each one a story of pride and value. He gestured toward a chair. "I'm so sorry for the confusion. When your son came in, he told us you had given permission to sell the car. He said it was part of his inheritance." The word inheritance hit hard. My husband's name, his memory, his work, all reduced to a lie. I kept my tone even. "Did he show you any documentation?" Mr. Daniels nodded slowly and reached for a file. He slid a paper across the desk. "This is the bill of sale. We required your signature since the registration was still under your name." I looked down. My name was there, written neatly, perfectly forged. "He told us you were too emotional to deal with it yourself," Mr. Daniels added carefully. "He said you asked him to handle everything." I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. My husband had rebuilt that Mustang piece by piece after retirement. It was his joy, his escape. And my son had turned it into a transaction. I asked, "When was it sold?" He opened his computer and clicked through records. "Last Friday, paid in full. It was a fast deal." On the screen, I saw the listing. 1969 Mustang Mach 1, restored, sold. The photos looked clinical, stripped of sentiment. I swallowed hard. "Do you have any record of where it went?" "Confidential, ma'am," he said gently. "But I can tell you this much, it went to a collector out of state." I leaned back, feeling a cold calm settle in. "Then I suppose I'll need to speak to my lawyer." Mr. Daniels hesitated. His face shifted, something uneasy flickering behind his professional tone. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said quietly, "there's something else you need to know." I looked at him. "What is it?" He folded his hands. "Your son came here twice before the sale. The first time he brought his wife. They argued right in this office. She told him not to go through with it. He said he needed to prove he could provide for her. That's when I realized this wasn't about money. It was about pride." The words stung. I thanked him, took the papers, and left. Outside, the sun was bright, but everything felt dim. My reflection in the car window looked unfamiliar, older, harder, and more certain than before. He had forged my name, sold his father's legacy, and lied to my face. But the truth was no longer hidden, and now it was mine to use. Mr. Daniels hesitated before opening a folder on his desk. "There's one more thing, Mrs. Whitmore," he said. "I shouldn't show you this, but you deserve to know the full picture." He turned the screen toward me. It was an email thread. My name was in it, copied as if I had been part of the conversation, but I had never seen these messages before. The first one was from Sophie, my daughter-in-law. Her words were sharp and calculated. "You need to act like the man of the house," she wrote. "Your mom's car is just sitting there collecting dust. Sell it. Use the money for something meaningful. Paris will show people we're doing well." The next email was from Andrew. "She'll be furious," he wrote. "That car meant everything to Dad." Sophie replied, "Exactly. He's gone. You're here. Start living for yourself. People respect confidence, not sentiment." My hands went cold. Every sentence felt like a wound. Mr. Daniels watched my reaction but said nothing. He clicked to the final email where Andrew had sent the signed documents to the dealership. Sophie replied minutes later, "Perfect. You're finally thinking like a man. Paris, here we come." I couldn't speak. That car was my husband's heart. Every weekend he worked on it with Andrew when he was a teenager. They rebuilt the engine together, tuning it late into the night while I brought them coffee. It wasn't a vehicle. It was a connection between father and son. And now, that connection had been sold to buy attention. I asked quietly, "When did you receive this?" 3 days before the sale," Mr. Daniels said. "I didn't think much of it until you called. I've seen people sell family heirlooms before, but this felt different." I nodded, too numb to respond. I thanked him for his honesty and took copies of the emails. Driving home, the city blurred past. I didn't cry. Not yet. I felt something deeper, disappointment heavy enough to silence everything else. When I reached home, I walked into the garage again. The space looked emptier now that I knew the truth. I could almost hear Frank's voice, calm and steady, reminding me that patience always exposes character. On the workbench sat a photo of the three of us, taken the day the car was finished, Frank's arm around Andrew, both of them grinning, covered in grease. That memory felt sacred. And Andrew had traded it for a vacation photo. I sat on the old stool, folded the printed emails, and placed them inside the envelope with the forged contract. The evidence was complete. They were in Paris, smiling for cameras, showing the world an image built on deceit. I wasn't going to stop them. Not yet. I wanted the guilt to grow on its own. I wanted the moment of truth to hit when they least expected it, when they came home thinking they had gotten away with everything. Because the lesson I planned wouldn't be loud. It would be quiet, firm, and unforgettable. But I wasn't going to let them enjoy that trip without understanding what they'd done. The sound of their car pulling into the driveway made my stomach twist. I watched from the kitchen window as Andrew stepped out first, his smile wide, forced. Sophie followed, laughing, her hand brushing his arm as if the world were perfect. They carried bags, souvenirs, and the energy of people who thought their secret was safe. I opened the door before they could knock. "Mom," Andrew said, voice bright, "we brought you something from Paris." Sophie held out a small box wrapped in gold paper. "Just a little thank you," she said. Her tone was sugar, but her eyes avoided mine. I took the box, set it on the table, and smiled politely. "You must be tired. Sit, I made dinner." They followed me to the dining room. The house smelled of roast chicken and thyme, the same meal Frank used to love. It was calm, deliberate, almost ceremonial. The kids were with Sophie's parents, so there was no noise, no distraction, only the three of us. We ate in silence for the first few minutes. They talked about museums, food, the Eiffel Tower. Andrew showed photos. Sophie described their hotel suite. I nodded, listening, watching. When the plates were cleared, I stood, walked to the sideboard, and picked up a plain brown envelope. I set it down in the center of the table. The air changed. "What's that?" Sophie asked. I looked at Andrew. "Why don't you tell her?" He stared at the envelope as if it might burn him. "Mom, I can explain." "Go ahead." He hesitated. Sophie shifted uncomfortably. "We were going to tell you," he said finally. "It was just complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated. My voice was low, steady. You forged my name and sold your father's car? That's not complicated. That's dishonest. Sophie's face drained of color. Her smile vanished. You told me she'd given permission, she whispered. Andrew rubbed his temples. Sophie, please. I opened the envelope. The documents slid out. Contracts, emails, printed bank transfers. I spread them across the table one by one. You lied to both of us, I said. But this wasn't her fault. You did this. Andrew's shoulders slumped. I thought you'd never let it go, Mom. The car was just sitting there, Sophie said. Sophie cut in quickly. I didn't force you. Her voice trembled, defensive. You wanted to do something big for us. You said your mother would understand. I looked at her. Understand? You both used a piece of his memory to buy a photo opportunity. Sophie's eyes flashed. It's just a car, she said sharply. You act like it's a person. That was the moment everything froze. Andrew looked at her, stunned. I could see regret flicker in his eyes, but it was too late. I leaned forward. You're right. It's not a person. It's what your husband and his father built together. It's what he left behind. You reduced that to a down payment on an image. Sophie's voice softened. I didn't mean... I stopped her. No, you meant exactly what you said. The silence after that felt like stone. Andrew finally whispered, Mom, I'm sorry. I nodded once. You will be. They didn't know it yet, but the lesson had already begun. Then Sophie said something that revealed she wasn't sorry, only scared. The morning after their return, I asked Andrew and Sophie to sit with me at the kitchen table. I wanted the conversation private, calm, and unavoidable. They fidgeted as I poured coffee, the steam rising like the tension between us. Sophie spoke first, trying to soften her tone. Mom, I thought it would be okay. I encouraged Andrew to sell the car because I didn't think you'd notice. Her words hit me like cold water. I stared at her. You thought I wouldn't notice? That you could manipulate my son and my husband's memory without consequence? She hesitated, glancing at Andrew. There was pressure, the bills, the lifestyle, planning the Paris trip. I didn't mean to. I cut her off. Don't confuse excuses with reasons. You did this to show off. It was pride, not need. Andrew's face flushed. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I let silence stretch over the table. I reached for my phone and called Mr. Daniels, the owner of Heritage Classic Motors. I put the call on speaker. His voice was calm, professional, but firm. Yes, Mrs. Whitmore, he said. I can confirm the sale documents, the emails, everything you've mentioned. Sophie tried to interject. It's not all. Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Daniels continued, your son and his wife were clear in their instructions. They provided documents claiming authorization, but it was never true. Andrew's shoulders slumped and his hands covered his face. Mom, Sophie's face turned red. We only wanted to make memories to show initiative. I never thought it would hurt. I held up a hand. Stop. That car was your father's memory, not a project for social media. You treated it like a prop for your trip. The truth hung in the room. The kitchen seemed smaller, the walls closing in around their guilt. Mr. Daniels added, If you wish, we can reverse the sale if the buyer hasn't finalized payment. Both Andrew and Sophie froze. Their eyes met mine, hope and fear mingling. I said nothing. I let them sit in the weight of their actions. Sophie tried again, softer this time. Mom, can we make this right? I shook my head. Making it right means understanding the value of respect and honesty. That car was never yours to sell. The lessons you learned are more important than the price of the car. Andrew finally whispered, voice broken, I'm sorry, Mom. I should have stood up. Sophie's shoulders sagged. She looked at the documents, at her husband, then back at me. I was wrong. I thought it would be harmless. I nodded slowly. It wasn't harmless. You can apologize, you can learn, but the consequences remain. That car represents trust. You broke it. The tension hung in the air, a fragile balance between regret and responsibility. Then Mr. Daniels dropped the final bomb. Mrs. Whitmore, the buyer who was supposed to take the Mustang, backed out. The car is still here waiting for you. Silence fell. Sophie's mouth opened and closed. Andrew's hands trembled as he leaned back in his chair. I exhaled slowly, letting the truth settle. I looked at both of them, calm but firm. You will remember this day. Not for the trip, not for Paris, not for social media. You will remember this day because pride and greed almost cost you something you did not own. The car, still in the garage, intact, became more than metal and leather. It became a symbol of trust, respect, and the consequences of betrayal. The lesson was clear, but would they truly understand it before it happened again? Would you take back what is yours, or let it go to teach someone the weight of their actions? The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the table where Andrew and Sophie sat. I had invited them to discuss what came next. The Mustang, still in Heritage Classic Motors garage, represented more than a car. It held a legacy, a memory, and a lesson. Mr. Daniels's voice rang gently in my mind from our previous call. The buyer had backed out. The car could be returned. All I needed to decide was how to handle my son and his wife. I looked at Andrew first. His shoulders were slumped, his hands resting nervously on the table. I spoke carefully. Andrew, the car is still there. You have a chance to make this right, but not for you. You do it so your children understand the value of honesty and respect. He blinked, processing my words. Mom, I understand. I'll pay back every cent, everything. I won't ask for anything. I want to fix this. A flicker of humility returned to his eyes. I hadn't seen it in years. Pride and vanity had clouded his judgment, but now there was a spark of responsibility. You will earn it, not just with money, but with actions. Your children will see you do the right thing, I said. Sophie shifted in her seat. I could feel her planning something, a last attempt to manipulate the situation. I can help too, she said, her voice soft, measured. I looked at her steadily. Sophie, this isn't about appearances or convenience. You will only act if your actions are honest. Anything else will undo the progress we've made today. Her lips pressed together. I waited. She nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement that the lesson was real and unavoidable. Andrew spoke again. I'll contact Mr. Daniels today. I'll arrange payment and schedule to bring the Mustang back. Mom, thank you for showing me how wrong I was. I nodded. Thank you for taking responsibility. That's the only way we heal. I took a deep breath and let the moment sink in. The Mustang story would continue with care, and my son would learn that shortcuts and pride only led to regret. The future of the car was clear, but more importantly, the values it represented were being restored in the next generation. Sophie's hands rested quietly on the table now. She avoided eye contact. I knew she understood the weight of her actions, even if pride still lingered. Andrew had faced reality. Sophie had been humbled. I felt the tension slowly release. I also realized that redemption was a choice, not an entitlement. Andrew could earn back trust, but Sophie would have to prove her sincerity with consistent actions. I wasn't naive. I had seen manipulation before, and I would watch closely. We went over the details. Andrew would transfer his earnings to cover the full amount the car had sold for. He would meet with Mr. Daniels to arrange the return, ensuring the Mustang's preservation. I reminded him to document every step. Transparency now replaced secrecy. Sophie remained quiet, observing. I knew she had learned something important, even if it was fear at first. Her influence over Andrew had caused harm, but seeing him face the consequences humbled her. For the first time in days, I felt the weight lift slightly from my chest. This was not forgiveness yet, but accountability. My husband's legacy was intact, and my son had a chance to learn responsibility the hard way. I looked at Andrew, softening my tone. This isn't about punishment. It's about making choices that honor your father's memory and teach your children respect. He nodded solemnly. I understand, Mom. I'll make it right. But Sophie wasn't finished. She tried one last manipulation. Would you still keep someone in your life after repeated manipulation, or draw a permanent line to protect yourself and your family? A few days after the Paris trip, my phone rang. Sophie's voice came through trembling, almost choked with tears. Mrs. Whitmore, please don't tell my parents. I can't face them. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm and steady. Sophie, the truth isn't meant to shame you. It's meant to free you. Hiding only prolongs the problem. Facing it gives you a chance to fix things. She sniffled, almost pleading. I just wanted to look successful. I didn't think it would hurt so much. I let silence hang for a moment. Then I said firmly, "Actions have consequences. You can make this right, and that's what matters now." Later that day, I drove to Heritage Classic Motors to retrieve the Mustang. Walking into the garage, seeing the car untouched, brought a rush of memories. The Mustang gleamed, polished and proud, exactly as my husband had left it. I could almost hear Frank's quiet hum as he inspected his work. I parked it in the garage and called Andrew over. The kids, sensing excitement, ran to help. We wiped the dust off together, wiped the cobwebs from the corners, and restored it to the care it deserved. Their laughter filled the space that had been tense with disappointment. Andrew hung his head. "Mom, I am so sorry. I shouldn't have sold it. I got carried away." I put a hand on his shoulder. "You have apologized. Now it's about making better choices and learning from this. You've seen the impact of your decisions." Sophie arrived shortly after. She looked smaller somehow, humbled by the consequences. I am sorry too. I thought I was helping, but I see now I was wrong. I'll make sure Andrew keeps his word." I nodded. "This isn't about punishment. It's about understanding respect, honesty, and family values. If you can remember that, we move forward." We took turns explaining to the children what had happened. Not the guilt, but the lesson. Legacy matters. Pride and vanity cannot replace responsibility. The Mustang symbolized more than a car. It represented integrity, memory, and respect for those who came before us. When the engine started, after all those years, it felt like my husband's spirit forgave us all. As I turned the key, the engine roared to life. The sound reverberated through the garage, and I felt a weight lift off my chest. Andrew's eyes widened, Sophie's lips parted in awe. The children clapped. The car, our memories, and our family's lesson had returned, stronger than before. I smiled quietly. Sometimes giving a second chance isn't a weakness. It's understanding that people can learn from their mistakes if they face them honestly. Andrew and Sophie both nodded, silent promises hanging in the air. This wasn't an end, but a start. The start of conscious choices, accountability, and respect. Weeks passed, and the Mustang sat in the garage, shining like new. Andrew stopped by regularly, helping me polish it and checking the engine. Sophie followed quietly, offering assistance only when asked. She still carried the confidence of youth, but there was humility in her gestures and respect in her tone. I watched them both, realizing something important. I hadn't lost a car. I hadn't lost memories. What I had reclaimed was far greater. The values my husband and I had worked for, the lessons of honesty, responsibility, and respect. This Mustang was never just a car. It was a symbol of legacy, of integrity, and of family standing firm against selfishness. The children came over often, curious and joyful. They helped dust off the Mustang, asked questions about their grandfather, and listened to stories about how he restored it with love and care. I saw understanding grow in their eyes. They weren't just learning about a car, they were learning about accountability and the weight of choices. Andrew and Sophie began to navigate their relationship differently. He acknowledged the mistake openly and took full responsibility for the sale. Sophie learned to temper her ambition with thoughtfulness. The tension that had once hung over our home eased, replaced with quiet cooperation. There was still work to be done, but the foundation had been reset. I reflected on my own actions. I had chosen calm over anger, strategy over impulsiveness. I had confronted the truth without yelling, demanded accountability without destroying bonds. The outcome proved that firmness combined with patience could repair what arrogance tried to break. Some lessons require pain, some forgiveness requires proof. But love, when guided by truth, can still rebuild. The Mustang reminded me every day that actions have consequences and lessons are often learned the hard way. It also reminded me that holding people accountable doesn't mean holding grudges. Andrew had faced the results of his choices, yet he had the chance to make amends. Sophie had seen the impact of her influence and changed her approach. The dealership's call, which at first had filled me with dread, ended up being a turning point. What seemed like a shocking betrayal became the catalyst for honesty, reflection, and growth. I realized that even in moments of anger and disappointment, there is potential for restoration if the truth is confronted with integrity. The dealership called to reveal a secret, but it also helped restore something greater to my son's honor. If you believe that respect and accountability are worth more than gifts or trips, subscribe for more real-life stories of truth and redemption.